You're not afraid of emptiness. You're afraid that emptiness is all there is. Hey there. Look around you. Look at what surrounds you. Your apartment, house, office. It doesn't matter. How many things in your space serve not a functional purpose, but filling the void? The phone you check every 7 minutes, the TV running in the background, the series you binge one after another, social media where you scroll. Why do we do this? Why are we afraid of silence and emptiness? In this video, we'll talk about existential anxiety, a condition that haunts modern humans, especially in a world where traditional religious and spiritual structures have lost their influence. And most importantly, how to find peace and meaning when there are no ready-made answers. Imagine, it's Friday, end of the workday. You've finished all your tasks, closed your laptop, you have the weekend ahead, and suddenly you're overcome by a strange feeling, uncertainty, anxiety, as if something important hasn't been done. But what exactly? You don't know. Familiar situation? This is a manifestation of existential anxiety. Psychologist Irvin Yalom defines its 4 components. Fear of death, fear of freedom and responsibility, fear of isolation, fear of meaninglessness. When nothing distracts us, when we're left alone with ourselves, these anxieties manifest more strongly. And the modern world, a world in which religion no longer provides universal answers, a world without ready-made meanings, only intensifies them. Martin Heidegger spoke of thrownness into the world, a state when a person realizes they've found themselves in existence without choosing it, without preparation, without instructions, without clear rules or purpose. Imagine waking up in the center of a maze. You don't know how you got here. You don't know if there's a way out. You don't know if there's anyone else. And the only thing left for you is to start moving and find your own way. Existential anxiety is that state when you realize that no one will give you a map of this labyrinth except yourself. Religion used to provide this map. It said, here's the path, here are the rules, here's the goal. But what do you do when you can't sincerely believe? When your mind demands rational proofs that don't exist and, perhaps, cannot exist? Modern man believes he knows much, but feels little. Carl Jung. Maria, 34, a marketer at an IT company. She has a good salary, a popular Instagram account, vacations twice a year. But when I ask if she's happy, Maria thinks, I don't know. I seem to have achieved everything I planned. But sometimes I'm overwhelmed by a feeling. What's it all for? What will remain after me? What actually matters? This isn't depression. This isn't burnout. It's an existential question that used to be resolved simply, live righteously, and you'll go to heaven. Or, your life is part of a grand divine plan. But in a secular world, such answers don't work. The scientific worldview, which destroyed mythological ideas about the universe, didn't offer alternatives for the inner human need for meaning. Physics can explain how the universe works, but can't answer why I should get up in the morning and go to work. Sociologist Peter Berger called this the homelessness of modern humans. Before, we lived in a sacred cosmos, where every phenomenon had meaning within a divine order. Now we live in a profane cosmos, a world of explanations, but not meanings. How does this manifest in everyday life? Here's a typical story. Alexander, 29, a programmer. His parents wanted him to become a doctor, but he chose IT. He earns 3 times more than his parents, bought an apartment, has a girlfriend, and yet, a constant feeling that he's doing something wrong. I achieved everything earlier than I planned, and now I don't know what to move toward next. I'm haunted by a feeling, like I should be doing something else, something more important. But what? I don't know. When there's no external authority to say, here's your purpose, a person is forced to create meaning for themselves, and that's an enormous responsibility. Man is condemned to be free, Jean-Paul Sartre. Andrew, 40, quit the corporation where he worked for 12 years, started his own business. The first months were full of enthusiasm, and then panic began. At work, I always knew what to do. There were KPIs, plans, tasks. Now I set the rules myself, and it's scary. I can work on anything however I want. And this freedom, it paralyzes me. Existentialists call this anxiety of freedom. The paradox, we strive for freedom, but when we get it, we begin to fear the responsibility that comes with it. In traditional society, your path was almost determined at birth. A blacksmith's son became a blacksmith. A peasant's daughter married a peasant. In the modern world, there are countless options, and this creates choice anxiety. Psychologist Barry Schwartz calls this the paradox of choice. The more options, the greater the fear of choosing the wrong one. The stronger the feeling that somewhere there's a better option. Does this sound familiar? Scrolling through Netflix for hours, unable to choose a movie. Or browsing dozens of job listings, feeling that none is a perfect fit. Now imagine it's just as difficult to choose a life path, a partner, values. Without external guidelines, without tradition saying, this is what's right. Jean-Paul Sartre said, existence precedes essence. This means that a person first appears in the world, exists, and only then determines who they are. In a religious worldview, it's the opposite. Your essence, your purpose is already determined by God. In a secular world, you determine who you are yourself. And this is the source of our anxiety. He who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow. Friedrich Nietzsche. Let's talk about the hardest thing. About death. In a religious worldview, death is not the end, but a transition. There, beyond the boundary, another life. But what if you don't believe in this? Nathan, 45, a middle manager, recalls a moment that changed his life. I was 35, an ordinary evening. I was lying in bed before sleep and suddenly truly realized, I will die. Not someday theoretically, but really, and it will be the end of everything. I will cease to exist. And such panic overtook me. I didn't sleep all night. It changed everything. I began to reassess my priorities. Irvin Yalom calls this an awakening to death, the moment when a person truly realizes their mortality, and this is the deepest source of existential anxiety. Paradoxically, awareness of mortality can become a source of meaning. Martin Heidegger spoke of being toward death, an authentic existence when a person lives aware of their finitude, and because of this, gives weight to every moment of life. Think about it. What would change in your life if you knew you had 1 year left to live? What priorities would you set? What would you stop postponing for later? Viktor Frankl, who survived Nazi concentration camps and created logotherapy, an approach to finding meaning in life, wrote that, for happiness, people need not comfort and pleasure, but meaning and purpose. And it's often in crisis situations, when we face mortality, that this meaning becomes clearer. A man is most lonely when surrounded by people. Henry David Thoreau. Olivia, 27, has 5,000 Instagram followers, 200 Facebook friends, but in the evenings feels such loneliness that she can't fall asleep. I always have someone to go to the movies or a party with, but I can't tell anyone what I really feel. It's like I'm playing a role, and no one knows the real me. Psychologists call this existential isolation, the realization that no one will ever truly understand your experience. Between you and others, there's always an abyss. In traditional society, this gap was filled by a sense of community, religious, cultural, familial. You were part of something bigger. In the modern, individualistic world, we're on our own, and this is a source of deep anxiety. Recent studies show a paradox. The level of loneliness is growing despite the development of communications. We're constantly connected, but don't feel real connection. We superficially interact with hundreds of people, but deep relationships are becoming fewer. Social networks create an illusion of connection, but in reality often intensify the feeling of isolation. We see edited versions of others' lives and compare them with our imperfect reality. But true closeness is possible only when we show our vulnerability, our doubts, our anxieties. when we risk being rejected, but give an opportunity for genuine connection. Life is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be experienced. Søren Kierkegaard. So how to live in a world without ready-made answers? How to find peace and meaning when external supports are lost? The first trap to avoid is replacing religion with pseudo-religion. Modern humans often make a cult of work, success, self-improvement. But these things cannot fill the void left by religion, because they don't provide answers to fundamental questions. Why do I exist? What happens after death? What significance does my life have on the scale of eternity? The second trap is escaping from anxiety through constant distraction. TV shows, social media, work, alcohol, anything that helps not to think about difficult questions. But sooner or later, anxiety will break through. And then it will be even stronger. What to do? 1. Accept anxiety as part of life. Irvin Yalom writes, "Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. It arises precisely because we are free to choose and bear responsibility for our choices. Instead of fighting anxiety, we can accept it as the price of freedom." 2. Create personal meaning. Viktor Frankl identified 3 paths to meaning. Through what we give to the world, creativity, work. Through what we take from the world, love, experience, beauty. Through our attitude toward inevitable suffering. The key here is personal responsibility for creating meaning. No one will give you a ready-made answer, but you can create it yourself. 3. Build authentic connections. When there's no common religious foundation, deep human connections become especially important. Relationships in which we can be ourselves, show our fears and doubts. Relationships based on shared values, not just shared entertainment. 4. Find balance between freedom and structure. Complete freedom often leads to anxiety. Structure gives a sense of security. Wisdom lies in creating your own structure, rituals, practices, discipline that will support but not limit. 5. Develop tragic optimism. Frankl called this the ability to affirm life despite its tragic nature, to find joy and meaning while being aware of the inevitability of suffering and death. Let's move on to specific practices that will help work with existential anxiety. 1. Mindfulness practice. When anxiety overwhelms us, we often either escape into the future, what if, or into the past, if only. Mindfulness practice returns us to the present, where we can feel grounded. Try a simple exercise. For 5 minutes, focus on your breathing. When thoughts distract, gently return attention to breathing. This trains the ability to be present in the moment. 2. Meaning journal. Every evening, write down 3 things that gave the day meaning. Not necessarily big achievements. It could be a conversation, a moment of beauty, helping someone. Such practice helps notice meaning in everyday life. So memento mori, remember death. Stoics practiced regular reminders of mortality, not to fall into despair, but to more acutely value life. Try asking yourself once a week, if I knew I had only 1 more year to live, what would I change in my life right now? 4. Dialogue with the inner critic. Often our anxiety is amplified by an inner critic, a voice that constantly says we're not good enough, that our life has no value. Try to identify this voice and engage in dialogue with it. What is it saying? Where did these beliefs come from? Do they really correspond to reality? 5. Socratic dialogue technique. When an existential question troubles you, try Socrates' method. Consistently ask yourself questions, digging deeper. What am I afraid of? What's the worst that could happen? How will I cope with it if it happens? What can I do right now? This helps transform abstract anxiety into concrete steps. Man is the only creature who refuses to be what he is. Albert Camus. One of the most difficult but most important skills for living in a world without ready-made answers is the ability to hold paradoxes, to live with contradictions, not trying to reduce everything to a simple formula. Here are some paradoxes we have to live with. We desire freedom and fear it. We seek closeness and fear vulnerability. We want meaning and understand its conventionality. We're aware of mortality and live as if immortal. Developed thinking isn't one that finds final answers, but one that can live with uncertainty. Psychologist Adam Phillips calls this the capacity to bear ambivalence. Remember a situation when you felt conflicting emotions, love and anger, joy and sadness, admiration and disappointment. Our first reaction is to simplify, to choose one. But wisdom lies in the ability to hold both poles. Similarly, with existential questions, we cannot have final answers and still live a full life. We can be aware of the conventionality of any meaning and still create it. We can understand our mortality and value every moment of life. Spirituality is not an escape from life, but a deep immersion in it. Jiddu Krishnamurti. Rejection of traditional religion doesn't mean rejection of the spiritual dimension of life, but the new spirituality of the secular world differs from the traditional. It is individual, not institutional, based on experience, not dogmas, integrates scientific understanding of the world, oriented to here and now, not the afterlife. How can this new spirituality manifest? 1. In feeling connected to something greater than oneself. This can be nature, art, community, an idea. Moments when we go beyond ego and feel part of something bigger. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi calls this flow, a state of complete immersion in an activity when the sense of time and separation disappears. In the practice of mindfulness, meditation, contemplative practices, anything that develops the ability to be present in the moment. These aren't religious practices, although many have roots in religious traditions. Today they're studied by science and show effectiveness in dealing with anxiety, depression, stress. 3. In transcendence through creativity. Creativity is one of the most powerful ways of going beyond oneself. When we create music, art, text, a project, we enter a special state where the ego retreats and we become a conduit for something greater. In the ethics of care. When there's no external moral authority, we create ethics based on empathy and responsibility, on understanding the interconnection of all living things, on the balance of personal freedom and care for others. The world is not a problem to be solved, but a canvas on which to create. Jiddu Krishnamurti. In traditional society, life was like playing a role in a play written by someone else. In the secular world, life becomes an act of creativity. Imagine that your life is a work of art that you create, not according to a template, not according to rules, but according to your values, your understanding of beauty and meaning. Philosopher Michel Foucault spoke of the aesthetics of existence, the idea that life can be lived as a work of art. This doesn't mean pursuing external beauty or success. It means living according to your values, creating meaning through your actions, making choices consciously. This isn't an easy path. It requires constant reflection, willingness to take responsibility, courage to act without guarantees, ability to start again after failures. But perhaps the meaning of life lies in this constant process of creation and rethinking, not in achieving some final goal, but in the journey itself. The question is not whether life has meaning, but whether you want to create it. Joseph Čapek. Living in a secular world is challenging. There are no ready-made answers, no guaranteed reward, no eternal life as consolation. There's only uncertainty, freedom, and responsibility. But in this uncertainty, there's also beauty. The beauty of choice, the beauty of creativity, the beauty of authenticity. Existential anxiety is the price we pay for conscious living, for life without illusions, for a life in which we create meaning ourselves. And perhaps meaning isn't in finding final answers, but in living worthily with open questions, in meeting uncertainty not with fear, but with curiosity, in accepting the paradoxes of existence not as a curse, but as a gift. Life without ready-made answers requires courage from us. The courage to create meaning, knowing its conventionality. The courage to love, knowing about impermanence. The courage to act without guarantees. Psychologist Rollo May called this existential courage, the ability to act in the face of uncertainty. And perhaps it's in this courage, to create, to love, to act without guarantees, that lies the answer to the question of the meaning of life in a world without traditional spiritual structures. What constitutes true meaning for you? What are you putting off for later? Write in the comments what you've never allowed yourself to do, and what has been holding you back. And I wish you existential courage to live a full life even without definitive answers. Because perhaps true wisdom isn't in finding answers, but in learning to live with questions.